What's up, Tyler?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going 10 out of 10. How are
10
you?
out of 10. I
10
could
out of
use I
10.
could use a 10 I feel like I haven't had a 10 out of 10 in like 3 months.
Well, I don't know if I'm actually having a 10 out of 10. I just say it.
Yeah, you're
So
gonna you're gonna
I
convince yourself that it's a 10 out of
convince
10?
myself. Yeah, you know what? I use this workout app. This is random, but I use this workout app, and at the end of the workout, it asks you to rate the hardness level of like how hard that was.
Yeah,
And I think what it does is it like I don't know uses some algorithm to then tell you how hard to go next time.
yeah.
But at the bottom, then it says, "What's your mood?" Like awesome, happy, et cetera, et cetera. And forever, I just kept hitting like the second one, like not not stars in my eyes, but a big nice smile, like happy. And this week, I'm like, nah, fuck that. I'm hitting awesome.
Damn.
Like today, I feel awesome. I'm like, if I do that, I set my day up.
Most times I feel like after you exercise, you feel pretty awesome, even if you feel beat up. Like getting started, I don't know if I feel awesome where I'm like just getting going. I'm like, I don't feel like doing
Yeah.
this.
I mean, recently I've been pretty tired in the morning because Nixon's not sleeping.
Yeah.
So that is usually the only contributor to me not feeling awesome, but otherwise, yeah, I feel great.
Yeah, lack of sleep will do that.
Yeah,
Damn kids.
I know. Well, speaking of gym and protein,
Oh,
we got
yeah.
we got
Nice
we got
segue.
we got Bryan Uhler on the podcast, from Pioneer Builders, brother to Awesome Framers. He's been on the podcast before, but this time we talk a little bit more about the specifics behind their business, his role in the business, how they're funding their spec projects, and some of the things that are non-negotiables, and furthermore the importance of running a tight ship and being really strategic with building, and a lot of that has to do with their specific market, but I think it can be attributed to a lot of us, especially those that are interested in getting into more speculative builds.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. I listened to a couple of other podcasts with him, and he's very intelligent, very knowledgeable, very humble. And their background definitely their upbringing, their dad's upbringing definitely lent itself to the type of building that they do. Their and I don't mean this in a bad way, somewhat self-proclaimed, but their frugality with business and that they are building to what their market will bear. And it's a very smart thing to do, especially when you look across social media and Instagram and TikTok and the entertainment industry and everything else where people are just looking to showboat and tell base how much money they're spending on things, and they build to the numbers. They build a very good quality house, but they are not spending
Mm.
unnecessary money just for the sake of putting it out there and having a showy project. So they're building a very high quality house, but they're building what their market will bear and what will bring them lead them to a profit. So it's just refreshing to hear that. That lack of ego and building with that frugality in mind and just building to your numbers, knowing your numbers. It was a good conversation. I was happy to have Brian on.
He did make one comment in describing what they did and why they did it that got me nervous. Not nervous, but basically was like what I'm doing with our first spec in terms of quote unquote overbuilding. But he later then kind of supports my decision, and I think he went as far as if I was in your position, Nick, I would go for it. I'm summarizing and probably removing a lot of like very cautious words, but I'm just gonna take that advice for what it is and rock and roll. So.
Yeah, I mean, listen to the podcast. You'll hear what he has to say about it. All good advice. Like I said, he's super knowledgeable, has a lot of experience, and I think that he was showed the ropes in the right way. And I think it'll speak to a lot of you guys and girls. So as always, let us know what you think. Leave us a review. We have some. We have finally some merch that's going to be coming on board here shortly. It's
We
been a
we got some
long time coming.
serious merch.
Yeah. So,
So, actually, Tyler, you don't even know this,
uh oh.
but our pre-sale launches tomorrow.
Oh, really?
So when this podcast comes out, our pre-sale will be launching on our website, moderncraftsman.co, and our t-shirt pre-sale will be launched. We partnered with a local t-shirt vendor that I think Tyler, you got some samples, right? I
I
sent you them.
No, I didn't get samples, but I've
Oh,
seen.
we sent them to you.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, so, I don't
So I
know
got
if
to
it
get
was
you
like
another one.
I don't know if it was like a month or so ago, but I had a couple of vendors and an order that was sent to me that,
Yeah, I
like,
sent it to you.
all went missing, and
Yeah.
everyone was like, "No, we sent it to you," and had to get everything resent. So I would assume that there's
Well,
somebody at an address near me that's wearing that shirt right now.
I hope so. I hope you see them at Starbucks
Yeah.
and be like, "Hey, man, thanks for supporting the Modern Craftsman." But the t-shirts are awesome. They're really well fitted. They're really durable. We actually outfitted Materia team, NS Builders team, even Motif with these t-shirts, and we have them being pre-saled on the website. So if you're interested in getting a t-shirt, make sure you sign up for the pre-sale. We're gonna hold that open for 4 weeks. And then we'll fill that order and then we'll go into regular sale. But we have two other products that are going to be launching, but we're going to save those and we'll announce those later. But they're dope. They're being manufactured. Actually, both of them are being manufactured right now. I actually got the word, Tyler, today that the smaller of the two products, we just gave the thumbs up on, and they're in production. So we'll announce that shortly. We'll do a pre-sale for that stuff. But yeah, get
Yeah,
on the
hop on the
website,
website,
order a
check it
t-shirt.
out, www.moderncraftsman.co. By the time you hear this, pre-sale will be up and running. So thank you in advance.
With that being said, did you know that Andersen is dedicated to designing and manufacturing products that are strong, reliable, and ready to perform? And they validate that by testing and testing and testing again until they know their windows and doors perform to their high standards.
They take the time to validate the performance of their materials as well as the performance of fully assembled products. They test their products to failure, not just to pass, meaning they test beyond the threshold required by the industry because they want to know that they're supplying a product that will perform in the most extreme conditions.
And if products withstand Anderson's best in class test, you can be confident that they will withstand the test for your clients. Visit andersenwindows.com for more information. One example of that would be a flying 2x4 that happened to be on a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean being picked up by a hurricane and slammed into your beautiful Anderson slider on your back deck on the coast of Seattle.
It's true. But we were there to witness a 2x4 getting launched out of a cannon at an Andersen window, which was pretty cool twice.
I will say I was a little disappointed that it didn't break more.
I
I
think
was expecting the glass to just like slow down the two by it didn't break. It just it shattered and said no.
no, but I what's even more impressive is as they continue to shoot at this window and the glass does fail, they then put an air test on this, and
Mm.
test the resistance of air through that product, which is even more impressive because the glass can be essentially shattered and it's still going to be airtight, which is pretty impressive.
Hey, avoid surprises, delays, and costly errors.
Picture this. Are you picturing it?
I'm picturing eyes are closed.
You're weeks into a project when an unexpected delay throws a wrench into your timeline.
Watch out for that wrench. Maybe maybe you're short on material and there's been a scheduling issue with your subs. No matter the reason and no matter how hard we try to avoid it, nearly every home builder has been there. But not anymore. Buildertrend's got your back with powerful tools that can help you catch and fix potential issues before they turn into expensive nightmares.
With real time project tracking and monitoring, Buildertrend acts as a second set of eyes, a savvy supervisor who never misses a beat. Your entire team in sync, including trades, better budget management, and cost tracking.
Everything documented so there are no disputes, misunderstandings, or confusion. Let Buildertrend get you there. To see the platform in action, head to buildertrend.com/MC demo today.
Doing good, doing good. Just dealing with brand new energy codes and how we're going to get away with it. So,
Uh-oh.
Before we get into building, Tyler,
Yeah.
we have talked about Trader Joe's candy on this podcast a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And someone, Hannah, actually, who we had Lawless Design, she was on the podcast a few episodes ago, commented on my story when I posted about Trader Joe's candy and told me that dried mangoes were her go-to snack. Now, mind you, I don't know how many people responded to my story, but everyone talked about the candy that they ate, chocolate, cookies, and she's the only one
They're
that
good.
that sends. She goes dried mango. I'm like, by far lamest response I've received all day, and
Trader Joe's dried mango is good.
I showed up in my office yesterday, and there's a box. Mind you, this is empty because I've eaten the whole bag. Uh, but
Is it
Trader,
like the
it's the
sugar?
yes, it's is it sugared, unsulfured, and unsweetened.
Yeah. The
So I am eating my words and dried mango that this is a delightful snack.
the sweetened ones, it's like
No, there's
even
so much
better.
sugar in these
Dude, I
ones.
know, but like the sweetened ones are so good, you can't stop eating them.
Brian, what's your go-to snack?
I'm not a huge snacker throughout the day. I kind of have a pretty boring palate. I've got a protein shake that I'll have partway through the morning.
Is it
I just,
flavored?
what's that?
Is it flavored?
Do you really want me to get into the details of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Biotest Testosterone Nation is like a company that makes protein and all sorts of different supplements.
Yep.
So, I will have like half oat milk, half water, a spoon of protein or a cup of protein powder, um, either like a greens or a veggie powder, a spoonful of olive oil, and a spoonful of apple cider vinegar,
What's the olive oil for?
just to give me some fat. Try to keep things to stay
Mm.
with me and stay not get hungry as quickly.
Mm. So is that what you eat for take for breakfast?
No, my breakfast is a protein cereal. I'll have that in the morning, and then actually right before this is a little protein bar.
Mm.
So I space some things out throughout the day, but it's pretty boring.
How long have
What?
you been eating that regimen?
A pretty long time. A pretty long time. We usually have leftovers that I can have in the afternoon, but yeah, kind of the key to success with the diet is not to have to think too much.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can just keep it pretty consistent, then I do pretty well with it.
Why the supplemental protein versus like animal product or something like that?
I do that too. It's
Yeah.
just super easy
Yeah.
and I feel pretty clean.
Mm.
Like I don't think I've got the inflammation and things like that. It gives me
Sure.
more fluid,
Yeah.
which I just don't drink enough water. I just don't.
Same.
Yeah. I will drink water if there's a water beside me, but the moment my cup runs out or my bottle runs out, like I have to think about going to fill it. So I
Yes.
started carrying for a while. I carry this half-gallon jug of water, and people are like, "Why do you have a half gallon?" I'm like, "Because I'll drink it." But right now I have a small one, and this will run out, and I probably won't refill it unless I actively think about it.
I was using my Samsung Health app to keep track of my water,
Mm.
and like every glass, I would hit the +1. By the end of the day, you're like, man, that is a lot of water. It's a lot of water, and I don't know if it's scientific to have eight-ounce glasses or what have you. It depends
Yeah,
on your how much you're sweating and working and
sure.
stuff. But I do feel better when I've got a cleaner diet.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the one frustrating part about that I find is that the longer you eat clean, and then when you go splurge and go eat like crap, like the other day, I decided to stop and get Five Guys burger. I'm like, oh, these are so good. I ate it, and I'm like, man, I feel like crap.
That's extreme.
It was. I put jalapenos, double burger, went all out. But it was. I just was like, this is. I told my wife, I'm like, I don't think I ever want to eat that again.
Yeah. Yeah. You can slip back into it,
Mm,
but if you're gonna have a cheat meal earlier in the day, at least you can kind of burn through it, but
Yeah.
later at night and then trying to get to sleep and
Like a cheap breakfast, like waffles with Captain Crunch cereal and syrup and
How
gummy
about
exactly.
bears.
how about balancing your diet? Any concerns? Like eating the same I always ate the same thing every single day for years, and I still somewhat do as far as what I'm eating,
Every
like
meal?
no, not at dinner, but
Oh.
like from the time I was 23 until the time I was probably 30, I would eat the same thing for breakfast and the same thing for lunch every single day. But it was like, to what Brian said, it was just, I didn't have to think about it. I knew how long it was going to take
Mm,
to eat my lunch. I had a routine. I would eat this first, then this, and then I went to the doctor and he's like, yeah, I mean, you're eating well, but you're not balancing your diet. You're just eating the same three to
mm,
four things every single day. So like, while it's not bad for you, it's not necessarily good for you. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I still eat the same things for like breakfast and lunch, just with different food added.
Yeah, apologies for my voice. Yeah, and I think there's micronutrients you have to think about that you're not going to get if you're
mhm,
having the same things all the time. But thankfully, Elizabeth is a good cook. We have sit down dinners as a family. I'm usually pretty strict Monday through Thursday. That's kind of the bulk of my work week. And then come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm not as strict. So if anybody is listening to this, I do not have it like totally regimented out like a robot. But you have to have some fun with it. But at the same time, I'm 43, and I think as time goes on, gone are the days of having more fun than less fun with diet.
mm.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, you just like for me, I just don't. I don't. I feel like I don't have the time to feel like crap, and every time I feel like crap, I'm just like not worth it. I'm not gonna do
Yep.
that again.
Yeah. No, there's nothing like having good energy
Mm,
and just rocking and rolling. Um, I think added to that is good sleep. That's another huge thing that I'm into is sleep hygiene, which I've
yeah.
got pretty dialed in. My wife has horrible sleep, so we're trying to work with her. She hasn't had a real good night's sleep in 13 years, 14 years, whenever she got pregnant with our first child. So
Mm.
that's kind of the way that goes.
So
What
do you
what
track your sleep?
creates lack of sleep for her?
She tosses and turns. She tends to have achier joints. And I think there's a mom radar that sounds will wake her up. Like she's just used to taking care of the kids.
Mm,
So I think that's the main thing. I don't think it's anxiety or racing thoughts or things like that. It's more just the physical body.
Does she exercise?
She does. Yeah,
'Cause I feel like just being tired sometimes I sleep, like, if I don't work hard enough or if I don't do enough during a day, I'm very restless at night.
totally agree. Yeah, if I get a good weight lift in, the sleep is outstanding. It just puts me into a deeper sleep.
mm,
Yeah. My wife wakes up a lot though too, and she wakes up early, like no alarm early, and I'll wake up and she'll be in the middle of watching a show in bed, and I'm like, "How long have you been awake for?" And she's just full. She's like, "Oh, in like an hour, hour and a half. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to wake you up though." I'm like, "Oh my god." Just
that,
as soon as she stirs, like she's up. She can't go back to sleep.
jeez.
I'm not like that. I go back to sleep.
Yeah.
No problem. So what's it? Lunchtime over there? Noon?
12:11. Yep,
12:11.
just after noon.
So how are you guys, busy?
We're in a weird spot right now. I'm always busy. Like that's just the way I'm wired. So I am always busy, but as far as work is concerned, we're just trying to stretch it out right now. We switched over to 100% spec a couple of years ago,
Mm,
which is great. Um, but you are much more beholden to the market. And right now, it's like a war of attrition with when mortgage rates are going to come down.
mm,
So we're trying not to put too much capital out there. And I may end up taking on an addition, which is not our bread and butter. But I also don't want to lose any of the guys. So Yeah, we're in an interesting spot right now.
And is it essentially that you aren't able to get what you want for the houses because the interest rates are too high right now, so people aren't willing, or they can't get the lending, or they're just not willing to spend that for a house?
There's a couple of factors. The primary area that we're building in, while it's a fine area for commuting, it's not very well known.
Hmm.
So the 3 rules of real estate: location, 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 become more important when there's higher interest rates, like you're
Mhm.
saying. And the amount of what people can afford is reduced when mortgage rates rise. It's just simple math.
Mhm.
So the number of buyers out there is lower. Um, and I think I actually just checked today, the average rates were like 7.68, something like that. If that starts coming down and it hits 6, 5%, the floodgates are going to open up. So we're still getting showings, but we intentionally do not try to compete with the national builders. So they are already more expensive just on a dollar for dollar absolute basis.
Wow.
Then you add to it interest rates, and then it's just more difficult. Plus, um, if somebody is right now at like 3 or sub 3 interest rates, they've got to have a real good external motivation to sell their current home in order to buy something at 7.68. Like,
Yeah.
it's lights out different.
What is it the same with the, like, I want to say used house market? But like obviously you're selling new homes. Are preoccupied homes, like second, third, fourth owner homes, still selling with the interest rates? Because around us, it's like it's still crazy. Everything's selling. Everything's going above asking price, even with the interest rates as is. But I don't know if that's the case for the new home market.
It's very different regionally, right? So you're in New England, I think.
I'm
Just
in Jersey. I'm close to Philadelphia.
so as a general, what would you say, Northeast,
Yep.
your market is doing better than ours in the Northwest. And part of that is a function of the price run-ups that we saw for the last couple of years. So one thing I do is I follow a few different local zip codes on Zillow. And so I get, I don't know, maybe dozens of emails a day. I don't want to oversell that, but quite a few emails every day with like new listings, price reductions, and I'm just able to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going
Mm.
on in the
That's a great
market around me.
that's a great idea.
I've been doing it for years,
Yeah.
and so over time, you feel what's
Mm.
happening in the market. And June of last year here is when I saw the price reductions begin.
Mm.
And they pretty much haven't stopped in this area. So I think they're still trying to find the floor. But if you have a house, just to give you another little tip, um, you can take ownership of it on Zillow, is what it's called. And then you're able to see how many people view your property every
Mhm.
day. You get an email in your inbox, and then whether or not there's any saves. So you've got people who lurk on Zillow, right? That are just like, that's their pastime. They just check out what's going on out there. But it's still a barometer. So even if you get 10 views and they're not all actual buyers versus one view versus 25 views, you start like gauging, okay, I see what's going on. Then all of a sudden I'll see the saves start coming in. And before long I'll get a showing. Like it's kind of interesting to see that data filter through.
I saw a Instagram meme or whatever the heck you call them the other day where it was that song that the SNL character dances to that everyone's playing right now. But it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
me at 2 a.m. looking at multi-million dollar farmhouses with $15 in my bank account. It's like
I love it.
I can somewhat relate to that. I mean, a little more than $15, but it's like people do that all the time.
I love it.
Um, yeah, that's interesting that like I said, the market around here, like everyone thinks that the interest rates aren't stopping people. It's crazy. And like how much, like I thought that people were over investing when COVID hit, that you would never recoup the investment and that you were overbuying, and we were going to have like an economic collapse essentially due to the real estate, and it's continued to go up. And that now it's like when the home prices couldn't get any higher, now it's interest rates have more than doubled, and people are still buying and still paying over asking price, and it's like, how are you ever going to get out of these homes?
Who knows what they're thinking, but Dad and I were down in Las Vegas a year and a half or so ago. I don't remember when it was, but in any case, rates are going to drop. So even if you lock in now, you can refinance
Yeah.
at a lower rate. And,
That
and that's what
yeah,
people are just totally seeming to forget, is there is the refinancing part of the equation.
right. Yeah,
But
that's how I feel, and like we have a handful of clients that it's the same thing. They're gonna wait, and like, what are we waiting for? They're like, we're gonna wait for rates to drop. And two of the projects, I'm like, I understand. I do understand that you want the money to be cheaper now, but it if you're gonna go into this with a construction loan, you're paying interest only anyway. So you're paying interest only, and then you're refinancing when construction's done into a traditional mortgage, which could be 2 years from now, which could be when the rates drop.
And people just don't think about the market that much.
Hmm.
And not only the real estate market. What I mean by that is I've
More.
got a calendar event the first of every month with like a series of things for me to do. And one of them is to check lumber prices. So not that I hit it on the first, I keep it in my inbox or
Yeah.
whatever. And then I look and you can check the chart. And then I was just listening to a podcast and it looks like lumber is going to be going up. So yeah, your mortgage rate may drop, right, in 6 months, but what's lumber going to be doing?
Well, that's what everyone's like, you know, well, I want pricing to come down. I'm like, it's not.
Nope.
In forget material, labor. Like labor skyrocketed. We were, every trade that we talked to, it's like, yeah, we're up 10, 15, 20% in cost. And that's not going away.
Nope. No, in fact, Timmy just texted me this morning. One of our guys' rent is going up $200 a month. I think it's starting in September. Well, hope I don't know when you guys are going to air this. I don't know if he listens to you, but he's going to get a raise. I can't lose him.
You heard it
And
here first, bud.
yeah, you heard it here first, Kyle. But that's the reality,
Right.
is his landlord needs to charge more. It's going to trickle through to me, and guess where that hits? It
The
hits the
client.
buyer in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, there's no cheaper time. Everything continues to get more expensive. And it's so bizarre, like just thinking about some example, like cars, for example. The fact that people are paying over sticker now. If you told someone that 10 years ago that, hey, in 2020 to 2023, you're going to pay over sticker for a car, people would think you were out of your mind
Yeah.
for a normal ass car.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, the sticker was the suggested price that no one ever even got close to. It was always this discounted thing. Now it's completely flipped. It's like I remember buying a $10,000 pickup. That was an expensive pickup when I was in high school. I was paying that thing with every penny I had. Now you couldn't get a decent car for 10 grand.
no, barely
Definitely
running.
not.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You
So
know?
how many houses do you guys like? How many are you building at a time?
That is such a good question because I don't have a stinking clue anymore. Like,
Like, how many are you building
Aren't
in a
you
year
running it?
on
I
average?
am, we are having to be we've been reactive ever since COVID hit. So COVID changed everything. Then another factor is as Timmy's getting older, he's out of the field most of the time now. He still works in the field. Then you get new guys who don't have the skill set that we used to have, so your productivity goes down. And then there's also just the side of I don't want to be building too quickly. But right now we've sold or rented like 2 houses this year. I think one of them was January 1st, but I don't want to get too precise and waste everybody's time on your podcast. But basically, we've rented 2 houses this year. We've got one house completely finished that's listed. Another house that is at finishes. They're painting millwork today. Carpet will go in next week. Landscaping will be starting within a week or so. Another house that the guys are just wrapping up all of the cladding on, and I haven't decided how far we're going to go with MEP on that one until something shakes loose. Then they're starting to frame another house next door. The foundation's all up. I think they might be snapping lines today or something. I'm meeting with a site work guy on another project that we're going to start to keep the guys in work and also to keep the building permit active.
Mm.
Then another one, I've got the permit pulled, and eventually we're going to be in the same boat just to keep the permit active. And then I'll be in project development thereafter.
So
Do
what's
you?
Doing-
typically like a half dozen projects that you're closing out a year?
In the past, it averaged to about 5.5.
Yeah.
But we've in the way past, like say it was 30, when
Yeah.
dad was really going
Mm.
fast. Now it seems to be more like the 2 to 3 number, which we could do faster, but it's an intentional, all right, this is the marathon. I'm not sprinting right now. I'm
Yeah.
going to be doing a hopefully a steady pace.
Nick, what were you going to ask?
Are these traditionally financed, or are you guys like, how are you guys financing so many projects at a time?
We've made a lot of self-investment. I'll just put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I actually want to know.
okay. Yeah,
I
we're the
listened to
bank.
so I listened to another
Yeah.
podcast or a couple with you, and you essentially the moniker that you deemed yourself was an asset firm, where you guys
Mhm.
are owning the land, owning the build, can potentially rent. Like, I want to dig into that, like if that were even possible, for how difficult that would be for somebody to essentially get to that position today. Like, how would you do that?
So dad made money on a development is what I would say years and years ago. I
Would you
think
Sorry to cut
go,
you off, but do you think that you could get to the same position you are without that?
I think there's always a way. I think
Mm.
there's always a way. But so much of anybody's success comes down to right place at the right time, right set of circumstances. Two different people could do the same things, but just due to um, what would you call it? Chance.
Mhm.
They get a different result. And who you're surrounded by. I mean,
Sure.
literally, the guy who dad bought the land from for the development that really set him up is who I'm working on doing a 21 lot plat right now.
Mhm.
He's still alive, like, go figure. Well, he was a forester. He graduated from University of Washington back in the 50s, but that's his background is forestry. And I don't know what his net worth is, but it's pretty high. And we've been working with him for 3 or 4 years now, developing a plat. So knowing people, networking,
Yeah.
ultimately people like dad.
Yeah.
Um, he got 6 specs, financing for 6 specs when he was frankly a kid. I mean, he was in his 20s, but he was a kid. And he's like, I don't know what she was thinking. She liked him. The banker liked dad.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge part of it is, yeah, I guess you don't have to be nice, but in dad's case, it served him well.
Is the banker mom? No.
No, no,
Just,
if
you
dad
never know.
died, actually the way our will or their will is set up is I'm the decision maker should something happen to dad. I think mom would bankrupt the company in record time
Damn.
should something happen to dad.
Mm.
I love her to death, but profit and loss, there would be a lot of loss very
Yeah.
quickly.
So was your dad able to take the land and sell it, or was it enough land for him to be able to develop? What did he do with that land?
Yeah, they were developed lots, and so he was able to build on them. But when you look at your budget, that's one of the hugest difference. We've done lots of customs, lots of pre-sales, lots of spec homes, but your budget looks different for when you're selling a land with a house, right? When it's the whole package. So to keep it simple, let's just say it's a $500,000 house cost and you do a 15-20% markup. If your land is another portion of that, your land itself may have increased in value and you get the profit off of the land. So you get both sides of that equation. Now, if you have a lot of carrying costs, obviously that's going to erode it. If you've got property taxes, interest, insurance, all that kind of stuff. But if you can turn it quicker, obviously you don't have near as much expenses, but a big part of that is you cannot time the market. So it's when you get started makes a big difference. It's like somebody who retires when the market is tanking.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
tough on them, but
Yeah.
you want to get in when you're 20 years old, when the market is down.
How much land are we talking?
Like in the past or that we have right now?
Like you said that there was a deal that essentially set him up. Like how much?
I want to say like 25, 30 lots,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I'm making that number up. It
Okay.
Yeah,
was,
I'm like curious if it was massive amounts of land where it's like we've been able to develop this. Like you're not still building on
oh
that
no.
land. Okay.
No, that was like early 80s,
Yeah.
early 80s. Yeah. One of the things though is dad did always know his numbers. So when he started, he was a framer and he was the framer's helper. I think that's one of dad's things is he wasn't ego driven. So if he was on site with somebody who's the expert, just tell me what to do and I'll bang walls.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull layout. You know what you're doing. And dad paid himself a wage. So if you pay yourself a wage starting out, you have that margin if you can't make money on the project, or you get both sides of it.
Right.
You're a business owner. That's how it's supposed to be. And then, yeah, he was able to build out fairly quickly, turn the money, and he also self invested. So he never lived high on the hog. Uh, when I was like in my early 20s, we've had lines of credit and loans for sure. And the banker made fun of dad behind his back because dad had big retained earnings. And it's like, interesting. And then 2007 hit, and you're like, well, who's laughing now?
Yeah.
So dad was the guy, sweatpants and a Camry, and perfectly happy. Not that that's what he had to buy, but it was
Right.
just kind of a logical mentality for him.
Why use cash if you have if when you can find like let me back up. Are you funding the job entirely or just the equity portion of it?
The whole thing.
So why not borrow money and keep that, use that cash for something else for more projects or different investments?
One, your profit disappears in a hurry if the
Mm,
houses don't sell.
fair. Yeah, because you're paying interest on it, right?
And all of a sudden you go bankrupt. Like that is the name of the game with developers.
Mm,
They all go bankrupt. It's just like a boom and bust cycle and it's always been that way. So, I think part of it is like if you know people who lived through the Great Depression, their mindset is different. They don't think the same as somebody who didn't have to scrape when it was, 20% unemployment. Dad was raised by two Depression era people.
mhm,
Timmy's told you the story already, but 8 kids, poor farm in North Dakota, that leaves an imprint.
mhm.
And so I think that's a big part of it is just the security of not owing other people money
Yeah,
and knowing how quickly that can go. And we've been through the ups and downs,
yeah,
feast and famine.
So,
yeah.
essentially, you guys are financing these build like when you're looking for these lots, are you typically purchasing one lot at a time in a neighborhood? Are you buying like entire plots to be developed? Is there no standard for you? Like what are you guys what's your bread and butter?
It's changed throughout the years. We used to buy a lot more spot lots. Right now, we've got about 15 or so in one specific development. We get such efficiencies and economies of scale when we
Yeah.
can build close together.
Yep.
but the big guys have come into our area and they weren't here 10, 15 years ago. So that's changed the equation. And part of it is we just can't have it all figured out. I don't know exactly where we'll be in 10, 15 years, but it's kind of like making the best decision with all of the factors at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to be flexible because you never know when that black swan event is going to happen that forces us to rethink what we need to do moving forward.
So are the big guys essentially coming in and buying more land that's leaving less desirable lots for you? Is it that they can build at such economies of scale that you guys can't compete, or a combination of both?
It's more, or a part of it is those who own the land before it's developed, and then they develop it, can sell huge amounts to these other builders, and it makes their life so easy.
Yeah,
So if they can sell 100 lots to a builder instead of 100 lots to 100 builders, they're going to deal with the guy with the deeper pockets.
yeah.
Mm.
So yeah.
So what as far as you guys buying 15 lots at a time, like what are the carrying expenses of that, being that you're essentially paying cash for these? Like if these lots aren't being developed, other than your taxes year in and year out, are there huge costs or burdens on you to hold those lots?
That's a good question. Um, there is the actual costs, like property taxes. If the lot's been cleared, there can be actual maintenance costs, like if you have to rent a mower and keep it mowed if you're in a development. There's some exposure to risk, but I don't think that's a very large exposure. But maybe you have to carry some insurance on it,
Yeah,
very minimal. I would suggest it's more the opportunity cost of having your money tied up in that piece of
yeah,
property as opposed to it elsewhere. However, they're not making any more land. So eventually, when we build on the land, we are not going to make as much money as maybe if it had been invested. But for us, it's a little safer. I remember being in a economics class, Mr. Wilkin, and he would just laugh because dad could not handle the stock market. Like, he just couldn't handle it. And Mr. Wilkin just laughed because here's dad, a spec builder, and he can sleep at night. Like,
yeah,
and like I think about it, and it's like, okay, what's the difference here? Well, I don't know what Elon Musk is going to do. He changes Twitter to X. Like, uh, what say do I have in what the owner just did, or the shareholder?
Mm.
When you're a builder, you're in control much more of the decisions, and so I do think that's part of it. If you don't let your ego drive the decisions you make with building, you're hopefully not going to overbuild and be unable to sell them. So I think there's a control factor that you lose when you invest it with somebody else.
yeah. Um, so can we dig into why you guys made the switch and why you prefer to be a spec home builder rather than any other modality of home building? Because it seems that most people who get into spec home building either um, eat their money, eat all their profits, or go out of business, or it just winds up being basically a marketing program for them. How and why have you guys switched to that being your main source of building?
So two things. One, people are crazy.
It's true.
Um, and so while that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, the amount of time I have to spend dealing with a custom home is, I'm going to guess, 20 times more than a spec home.
Easily.
Um, so if you figure out how much money you're earning per hour of effort going into that project, it's orders of magnitude less for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're very nimble. Remember, I'm doing my own books. I'm not hiring a bookkeeper.
Mm.
I'm administering our rentals. So what our profit is, and I just don't want this to sound prideful. I've been doing this a long time though. It's higher than if somebody had to hire out all of the services that I wear under my hat.
Totally. Yeah.
So if I can be lower volume, but I'm doing so much of that other stuff, we've got good profit, and I
Mm.
don't have the headache of dealing with other people. It's
Mhm.
not that I don't like other people. It's just that I want my headspace for my family and other things. And it is a lot more of an emotional toll trying to walk the line with customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. Like our architectural designer, he's told me, Bryan, if you build according to code, I don't care what you do. So I can do that. I was just telling Nick, I was dealing with some engineering stuff. I can read through the engineering and we just rock and roll. We've
Yeah.
worked with Terry for years. So we're so fast and streamlined. I don't have to ask permission for a lot of things. And when we do, we've got relationships with those people. So my life is a lot simpler by those efficiencies.
Yeah, people don't realize that. I mean, there's certain ways that self-performing winds up being slower, right? You're not doing the same thing day in and day out, but um, there's also a lot of efficiencies to be had where you are not necessarily waiting on decisions to be made, or you can audible or change your task, and you have the tools, the knowledge, and the wherewithal where you look at big picture and maybe day to day you are not as fast at framing a home or placing concrete forms, but when you look at the overall project and how little downtime you had waiting for trades and overlapping trades, you can really make up a ton of time.
Yeah, the example I give is we were building a pretty big house, and there was an upstairs hallway, and there was a partition wall to a double height great room below. And I'm looking at this, and it's like, man, it would be nice to open this up. So Timmy and I broke open the plans. There was no shear wall there, and we're like, okay, let's open it up. Boom, there's your change order.
Mm.
What would I have had to do? I wouldn't have probably pursued it. I would have
Yeah.
gone,
Yeah.
hey, this is a custom home. This is the plan. Architect drew it. We're not
Mhm.
dealing with it. What would that have cost a homeowner? Well, now we're letting this natural light splash all the way through. It was such a great thing to do.
Mm.
And subconsciously, it probably made the house more saleable. And I could just move on with my life that day.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that one way is better or the other. They both have their benefits, but on the financial side, we can make money on the land.
Yeah, that's also true. So
So,
who go ahead, Nick.
well, I wanted to go back a minute. So, Brian, I'm making the assumption here that you said earlier on a sale of a home, you might make 15-20%. I'm not sure if that was just an example or what you guys target for a project of your stature, but with 15 to 20% on a home is pretty decent. I'm sure these bigger guys are doing a smaller percentage because they're talking volume. But you
Mhm.
also said something in the beginning of the podcast. Let me back up. Pretty decent, especially because your overhead is so low. Because you are operating under many hats. That's a decent net profit for the company and the people that work within the company. But you also said earlier that you are oftentimes cheaper than these bigger builders. So did
No,
I hear that correctly? You're
I
not.
may have said it, and if so, I'm glad you caught it. We're the most expensive, like
Okay. That makes
without.
more sense because when you had said that, I'm like, man, you guys are building a better product.
Yeah.
Like, and my I guess where I was going to go with that, just to ask the question, is how much are you leaning into that in terms of communicating and explaining to the end user that, hey, we're building a better product, or is that just, hey, we build a great house, and we're not it's not a extra marketing tactic, it's what we do.
No, you have to communicate and educate
Hmm.
the buyer,
Yeah.
period.
Got it.
I do think that there is a subconscious sense people get when they walk through a Pioneer home because it is more solid. Like Timmy doesn't pay for his nails, right? So he doesn't care if he's putting extra nails in his braced wall lines. Dad, it would sound like a machine gun going off, and Dad just knows how many nails are going into that thing.
My dad always used to be like, "Nails must have been cheap back then."
Exactly. Bang, 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 bang. Is he a roofer or a framer, for crying out loud? But having said that, you've got maybe premium subfloor, things of that nature. An airtight house is quieter. Yeah, you can talk about the energy efficiency, but I feel like when you walk into one of our homes, there's a sense of solidity and peace that maybe the person doesn't consciously know, but it just feels better. So
Yeah.
that's on like, how do you even try to quantify that? But I've got a few different things that I do. One of them is a brochure that's like just a list of features, like a ton of stuff. And I include in there things that are code requirements that everybody's doing. But you talked earlier about the reseller home. They're not comparing me necessarily to another new home.
Oh,
What
great
about those
point.
3 other homes that don't have double pane argon windows with
Mhm.
low E coatings? Like, oh, okay. Oh, you've got a warranty on your roof. Hey, this other guy, I'm probably going to have to replace that roof in 5 years. What's
Yeah.
that going to cost? So it's a brochure that has all these features, and then it's got 2 other columns with check boxes for like home 1, or I guess home 2 and home 3. And mine have all the check boxes with checks in them. They should be doing the same thing as they go to the other houses by way of comparison.
Mm.
Then I wrote, it's about a page and a quarter building science explanation that I tried to keep very high level, not get too technical, but how all of the systems in the house work together to lead. Hopefully, it's a very logically driven, um, simple. And incidentally, we've sold more to the engineering profession than any other profession. So I don't think that's a coincidence by any
Mhm.
means. Whenever possible, I try to walk through with a prospective buyer. Um, and I go and give them the home tour and explain everything, and they love it. They just love that there's a builder who is teaching them, knows everything in that house. And again, I don't think people are stupid. I try and not quote unquote dumb it down too much,
Right.
but walk that line of technical speaking, but use illustrations and analogies that resonate with them. And then the other thing I do is I do just a quick YouTube walkthrough video. And when people are interested in the house, we can send that to them.
Cool.
Um, and I can use all the same things if we end up deciding to rent the house so people can see. And then maybe that even changes who your tenant market is.
Do you
So,
know
yeah.
typically how much more expensive you are than the other competitors in your market? Like when it comes to a percentage, are you 20% higher? No idea.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't.
I would just be curious, like if somebody's coming in and you're essentially giving them something that's comparable as far as like square footage goes, and be like, our house is 20% more. Would this be worth it to you? And that's not to say that you guys are even necessarily making more money, because your profit margins in there could be completely different. But I would just be curious as to like where that threshold is for the average buyer, where it's like, well, that's more than we're willing to spend, even if it's that much better of a house. Because I that's probably what you would wind up running into with these newer home builders, where it's just like, all right, that's just more than we're willing to pay, even if it is a much better built house.
It's more than just the house would be my answer to that, is the big builders have maximized in general the amount of square footage per lot,
Yeah.
Mm.
which means they're smaller lots. So like where we're building, it's a golf course community. They're larger lots, views of the golf course, older residential neighborhoods with they're well established. So the whole feel is different and who wants to live there is going to be different. than a professional in their early 30s, newly married, 2 kids. They're going to be more shifted naturally to the national home builders, and
Yeah.
that's really who the national home builders are geared to anyway. So the market is different itself.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes sense. So who's currently writing your spec for your homes?
You're talking to them.
So when you go through, right, there has to be so many considerations, basically profit, quality, value, like market interest, changes within the market, right? So you could build the exact same home next year, but have to build it a completely different way due to what the market is able to bear at that point. So how are you addressing that, and how are you going about that? Are you just looking at numbers first and then backing out of those numbers? Are you looking at what's on the market? How are you even entering um, into this entire like speculative process?
Um, we have a baseline that we just do regardless of where we build, period. It's just what we do. So it's not that every house is a snowflake. It's they're all snow, they're all white, they're all similar. White, I mean, in the
Hmm.
analogy, they're not actual white houses. Um, but there's just certain things we do on every house, and we refine that over time, and we're willing to adjust things as need be. But it's kind of like this is what we do. Um,
So,
and
what are you if the market were not like right now, what you're running into, if you had to build a new house now and you're like, we have to build this house and sell it this year, what things would you be willing to budge on to be able to unload that house and make money on it? Being that like we're experiencing what we are with interest rates and everything else right now.
almost nothing. And
Yeah.
that's why I said the war of attrition to begin with
Yeah.
is this is what it is, and this is how we build. And when I say I'm the guy who writes the spec, while I'm the ultimate decision maker, I take into consideration a lot of people around me, um, and try to make those adjustments. But just recently, it was like looking at the house objectively, what could we change? And there was pretty much nothing. And a big part of it, you'll hear Timmy, both of us talk about trying to be the rational builder. What makes sense to us is kind of the driving force. And and then trying to be an empathetic builder, like I have to build in such a way that I meet the needs of a buyer that they may not even know that they have that need. So I start with the building code as the baseline. You hear some people, and I get it, but they're like, oh, the building code is the least passing grade, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Can you please show me one section of the building code that is stupid?
Hmm.
Like, what part of the building code is just so insanely dumb that we should just make fun of all code built houses? I would counter, is a code built house actually meeting the building code? Or are
Mm.
they cutting corners and they're just passing inspections, but they're not actually meeting all of the sections of the IRC or the IBC or whatever the building code is? I think typically that statement relates more to the energy code more than the building code,
Yeah.
insofar as like egress requirements, structural requirements. So build to the code and you're going to have a decent house. Then the question is, what do you do to go beyond that? And those are where your floor layout comes into play, your window design, your aesthetics from the outside. Does it look, if you're going for geometric, are your headers lined up? Is it tight? And and I think people respond to that. When it looks like it's orderly, I'd like to say the reflection of an orderly mind, it feels better. Good architecture just feels good.
When you think about building homes, is your primary goal the the business aspect of it, like from a profitability standpoint?
I would say it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
Like Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And no, it's okay. And I guess where I'm going with that is, so we're doing 2 specs. We're starting one in September, and then we have another property we just closed on that we will start design on probably 2024, and then potentially start construction on it a year from now, depending on the potential pre-sale of our first. And the original thought when we went into this was, well, we could go into it and build a product that the masses want, find out, how to be competitive, how to compete against, we don't have a ton of big national home builders around here, but how do we compete, put a better product out than everyone else, but still be at that price point that, everyone is looking at. And I chose to go the complete opposite side of it. And I said, screw it. I'm going to ignore everything, and I'm going to build a product that doesn't exist. And I feel, I'm confident that there's a demand for it. And there's a big price tag behind it. But I'm not doing it because I want to sell a really expensive home. I'm doing it because for me, that home is a reflection of what I love architecturally and design wise, and ultimately puts us in a position where we become a product based business instead of a service based business.
Hmm.
Where I think about traditional custom home builders, you know i I think that the struggle I had with custom home building is, my portfolio looks like everything: farmhouse, traditional, modern, contemporary. And I don't, that's not what I want our aesthetic to be. I want us to have a more refined aesthetic that is more cohesive with, me personally, and ultimately my team and my brand, which has led me into this space. So, you know has that ever been a thought, or for you guys, as to, hey, what if we were to not be in the competitive realm of, spec building, and what if we explored being more risky and developing product that, maybe is attractive to a smaller population, or is that just, you know not of interest?
Um, it's not of interest to me personally,
Hmm.
but I also would say we don't really have that market where I live. There would be some areas if we wanted to do travel and do that type of thing.
Sure.
I'm personally not interested in that, and so it's very much a value
Yeah.
decision, right? Um, I started doing books for the company when we were in the 250s for job numbers, even though Dad, I think he built houses before that with the naming convention, call it like 259.
What do you mean
We're into
250?
the
Quantity of
um
houses built.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So while, he'd done building in the past and what have you, at least as for the purposes of this story,
Hmm.
we're into the 400s now.
Hmm.
Like just since I've been doing the books. That's a fair number of houses to have been running the books on, doing job costing,
Hmm.
running payroll. So I think my mentality is a little bit different when you get that many. Like imagine your one-off houses if you had done 400 of them.
Mm.
Your mentality would probably be different, And I think too, like when people hear this, you're listening to a company that's been in place for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
That's a different ball game than who Dad was when he first started. But in general, they're just a couple of North Dakotans. Dad was a farmer. Mom was from the big city of Dickinson. It's a different mentality. Like what he's building now versus what he grew up living in is lights out different.
Mm.
So when you guys said that you were building, you know, I don't know if it was actually 30 houses a year. You said you were building a considerable amount more houses per year. Was that during your time, or was that before you?
That was before me. Yep.
So what changed to make you guys settle into where you are now?
Um, Part of it is the amount of time that is out there to be spent running 30 jobs in a year. Dad was just a workhorse. And mom took care of the kids. And yeah, we'd play basketball and do that kind of stuff with dad, but mom was the one. She took care of us 3 kids. I've got an older sister, then it goes Timmy, and then it goes me. I spend a heck of a lot of time with my kids. So I think that's a huge part of it, is just how much bandwidth there is available to spend. Is I don't really want to be spending 50, 60 hours a week working. Come Thursday, the kids will have CrossFit, then they've got swimming in the afternoon. I like going to those things. I like spending time with my wife and my daughter. So it's an intentional choice. There's a lot more money that I could be making out there. But again, remember, this is a pretty mature company. So I'm 43, which isn't young, although I still feel just fine. But I think priorities are different for me than dad.
And was he obviously completely different economy and a different time, but have you guys are you building a better house that's commanding a higher price tag, essentially that's a higher profit house than when he was building 30 houses or whatever it was a year? Was that what Not that it was a lower quality house, but like have you basically transitioned into a more quality driven higher profit margin than what he was doing?
That is a very nice question. So dad was similar. Like if you kept, on a graph, dad was the top of all the builders in the area with what he was doing. And construction has changed in the last 40 years. And I think we're still at the top of that. It's just like as that progression has happened. So like we were one of the first houses to have Tyvek back in the day. I'm guessing that was in the 80s. Dad and another guy saw Joe Stiebrick back in the 80s do a building science seminar. Dad would take us to JLC conventions. We saw Mark LaLiberte. He came here in the 90s, maybe, and we saw him give a building science seminar. So dad has always been on the not cutting edge, like way out there, but he has always been a learner and looking for things to implement. And
That's
I think
cool.
Timmy and I are kind of the same way. So we've just kind of trended on staying on that, the front line, so to speak.
Do you feel he was always charging appropriately for that?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So yeah, so we try to do cost-based pricing. So the 15, 20% that I had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier, right? But the market might not say you can charge 15, 20%. The market might say, and I'm making this up, you could charge 30, 40%.
Mm-hmm.
It could also say you could charge 3 to 4%. If you keep your costs tight and you don't do a bunch of screw ups and you do things efficiently, you figure out what a change order would cost or a repair, and you have the systems in place to prevent the wasted money, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. All of a sudden you get to the end and you're like, there's no money here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if you keep it tight, then what we do is we start with what we want to make, or charge, I should say, for the sale. And then sometimes we have to lower our sales price. And then the cost-based pricing just went out the window. Now it's what can the market handle? But if you've got the retained earnings and you don't have those carrying costs, you can say, no, I'm going to hold tight for a while. I'm going to wait a while longer.
Mm.
How are you managing the budget on these specs as the job progresses? Because I would assume if you guys have been doing this for this long, you're going into it knowing pretty accurately what this should cost. So how often are you guys checking in on that to ensure that you're maintaining budget?
I've got another calendar event every month. I think it's on the 15th of each month because the 10th is bill paying. And we do, well, not that it matters, but we do an accrual accounting basis. When I get a bill, I put it into accounts payable and I job cost it or I code it where it needs to go. Like right now, if you looked in my inboxes, He would say there's nothing in there. I got to file my ones with the reminders for the meeting with you, but I had those in my inbox. Now my inbox is pretty well empty. I just know what the costs are,
Yeah.
and I can see something that's off. So at the start of a project, I don't do this big budget for all of the items. I just know the baseline things that need to be there are what they are, and I
Hmm.
don't blink about it. I don't second guess, oh, we've got, 21-inch wide footings or whatever was specced out by 8-inch deep concrete. Can we value engineer that? Uh, no, it
So,
is what it is.
so Timmy's not going, like, you're not telling him, hey, you got 3 weeks to frame this house.
No,
So
no.
with that, how are you then? Say he screws something up. Say there's a big screw up. Like, how are you then understanding what that cost is?
Now remember, Timmy's older than me, he's bigger than me, and he's meaner than me.
I don't think he's meaner than
Who's a
you.
better dancer?
Oh, you might be surprised. Both of you might be surprised at that, at both sides of the question there. No, so that's where the family dynamic comes in with Timmy in particular, right?
Sure.
Because he's my older brother. I'm
I don't
running the.
I don't mean it so much, sorry to cut you off. I don't mean it so much as a relationship standpoint, but I'm more, when you get to the end and you sell the project. I mean, you seem like you're dialed in. Like, I've known you for a bit. You seem very analytical, you're data driven, you're monitoring things. You have an inbox with nothing in it, which is mind blowing to me. But and you wear so many hats. So I like our spec. We're building a budget, and then because we have a set amount of money that we want to build this thing for, and then we have to basically figure out how to do it for that, which is going to be a feat in its own, especially coming from a highly custom world and in the details that we're going to try to pull off. And I understand that you've been doing this for so long, and you have close to 200 homes under your belt, and you understand what the cost should be, and when something comes in you can tell if it's off. But you know I would like to think that, or maybe you're already doing this, but if you were to track it and understand, all right, it takes 11 days, or let's 41 days to frame a house, but if we were to shrink that house by a foot, we could save 4 days, and here in now, where the house is essentially the same. I feel like you're probably doing something like that, where you're understanding the micro adjustments that can be made to get to that 30% that you would love to see. Am I way off base here?
It depends on what phase, in my opinion, what phase the company is in, where it's at, as far as how disciplined you need to be with each one of those decisions.
Mm. Meaning, like,
I
if the market's hot, it's like, just build it. We know we're going to make money. Great, move on. Versus, you said in the beginning of the podcast, right now there's a you're in a weird spot where you're kind of stretching things out. So you're not rushing to get a frame done. You might spend an extra week there because you want to keep guys employed.
So Dad's expression, I don't know if you remember, was it Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
Dad's line was, if you build it, they will buy.
Mm.
And that has been a big part of it, to be honest with you. I
See, that's how I
could,
feel about building this big, elaborate, expensive house.
yeah, but my guess is the risk is going to be very high. The
Eh,
risk is going to be very high. The reward can also be very high.
Right.
So you have to be that analytical
Mm-hmm. When the risk
um,
is so high, I get
when
it.
the
So when
risk is so high.
and you're operating at a low risk, potentially high reward,
Yes,
but almost guaranteed reward.
pretty
So
much.
yeah, so it's like, yeah, if Timmy takes an extra week or screws something up, you know, big deal. Like, well, it's gonna sell. There's enough quote unquote fluff in what we're doing here. We're not making
And
things more complex than they need to be.
and we're in a new environment now with social media and partnerships with other companies, right? I'm just kind of laying it on the table.
You're talking about like brand partnerships.
brand
Yeah.
partnerships with people. So
So
that
do you
changes the balance of the equation.
I mean, I'm well aware of that. I think that's one of the more interesting parts of the world that we live in today with brand partnerships. And I think what's amazing about it is it's mutually beneficial. Where it's like, a sheathing company might reach out to you guys and say, "Hey, we want you to only use our sheathing. Here's a giant discount for using it." And, you're selling the house for the exact same amount of money that the guy next door is selling the house for, that he's paying retail value for the plywood or the sheathing, and you're not. So you just added 2 points to your set to your profit. That's I think that it I think that's one of the coolest things about the world that we live in right now is that, you know, we have these opportunities, myself included. Tyler's done it as well. You have these opportunities to work with brands to be mutually beneficial to each other, but essentially at the core of it, it's adding profit.
And I would even suggest to take it one step further. At the core of it, if you're building with good products, you're building a better structure,
Better
you're building
structure
a better
for less
house,
cost. Yeah.
and it's going to be better for the end user.
Yeah.
I if you've heard the podcast before, I've used this before, but anybody know any of the names of the architects behind the pyramids or anything else built in ancient Egypt?
Negative.
Right. So Hammurabi, just in case anybody wants to be on Jeopardy, is one name. But those have outlasted the architect. Those have outlasted those who worked and actually constructed, and even who they were built for,
Mm,
right? Who we are at the end of the day, people are going to forget about me.
mm,
What can I do now, maybe to give people a better house that will protect them in case of an earthquake or a high seismic design category?
mm,
What can allow them to be comfortable in their house and they'll never even know it when they're having a bad day or there's just terrible news? Take something out of the equation to give them a better house, better life, not to think too highfalutin there, but just try to do good for other people and be happy with that. But to kind of shift back over to the social media side, we're trying to figure out. Dad wasn't a planner as far as who's going to take over the business or what's Timmy going to do, this and that. His awesome framers is completely what's I guess I'd say it'd be Timmy's retirement, whatever you want to say. And there's no way I want to lose his institutional knowledge. I mean, he and I can have a conversation about, I'm telling him about climate zone 4C and 5C and the 2021 Washington State Energy Code. And we get the stuff from the engineer and we're going through the, 3x6, blah, blah, blah. And we can have those conversations. If I had to try to invent that with somebody else, it would be a lot more work. So I'm dialed back on being super strict and tight right now. But if I was in your shoes, Nick, I would be absolutely locked down on the details.
mm.
And I think too, the pandemic was tough. Post-pandemic was tough. And I've had to let things go because of the family dynamic. I can't be coming onto the job site and being that guy because of everything everybody's been through, even just
Mm,
psychologically, myself included. It has not been easy. So, can I make less profit and not be a heavier weight on those other people that are working with and for us?
yeah.
And now we're coming out of that. Supply chain seem to be healed. So, just over the weekend, Timmy and I had a conversation, and I don't want this to sound as very strong because I didn't say it strongly, but I was just like, we can't do this anymore. Like, what just happened on these two decks, the amount of money that went into that,
Mm,
we can't do that anymore. We're starting a new project. If we take on this addition, we will go we'll go broke or whatever I said. So it's kind of like understanding what we've been doing needed to be done for that time period. Now that everybody's kind of healing, the economy, etc., now let's start getting tighter again, like we were in the past. So
What what specifically on those decks? They were just being overbuilt. Product costs were going up. What was that detail that just kind of was the last straw?
yeah, so the type of posts and top cap ended, we should have just gone with like a white wood or done some kind of a post material, but the guys ended up painting them. Um, the the railing was very expensive, but even the sequencing of everything being dialed in.
Mm,
So I talked to Timmy. He's not a natural project manager.
mm-hmm,
Like, and my brain works with predecessors and successors, and this leads to that. And how does a Gantt chart work? And can
mm-hmm,
you make your list and then put your dates over the top? And can you figure out critical path, the whole 9 yards? That's just kind of how my brain is geared.
mm-hmm,
So for Timmy, especially if he's not going to be on site as much, I suggested to him, come up with your task and write the whole thing out. And then everything is planned ahead. It's easier to manage the other guys, especially if he's not going to be bags on. So there was a lot of trips made to the lumberyard
mm.
that really probably should have been dialed in the whole way through, as if you were going to be a deck builder.
Yeah, have everything there, do it in one shot. So you're in tune enough to see that.
Yep.
Mm,
Yep. Yeah, it's knowing, was it Simon and Garfunkel? There's a time to speak and a time to keep quiet.
mm,
So just like my dad has to do, you just kind of know when to bite your tongue. And I shouldn't even say it like that because I really wasn't wound up. I'm
yeah.
not wound up about it, but it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
just calling it like what it is. It's, hey,
now it's
this
time.
costs us way more money than, in your case, like that that you thought it should, and you saw the inefficiencies.
And he knew.
Yeah,
Like, it wasn't like I was saying something. He was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
right.
So that's
So
nice.
so with everything, in terms of that, in terms of everything that you have kind of in your head, what if something were to happen to you?
Well, I have tried to get everything well organized. So if something should happen, it would be kind of intuitive for people to see how I've done things.
Mm,
So, like, I use Office 365 for my file structure. Um, I think it's delineated very clearly that if anybody looked at it, they would see, okay, projects, development, house number, you go into that folder, engineering is a folder, plans is a folder, budget is labeled very clearly. You double click on those things, you'll see, okay, it fits a pattern.
mhm,
Um, Either they would fold up the company, to be quite honest,
mhm,
or they would have to subcontract out like the bookkeeping to somebody else. Um, but I try to do training. I forget what I was just talking to my wife about, and it was that same thing. I'm not planning on dying, but it's like what would happen to the show, even
mhm,
within the family. If there's things that I know, I want to make sure, like that's one of them. So we've got a Vanguard brokerage account, and so we get dividends off of our money market fund.
mhm,
Elizabeth reconciles all of our bank accounts, but she's not very familiar with the brokerage side of things.
mhm,
So this month I just showed her, here's the dividend for the month. That's it. I'm
mhm,
not going to get any deeper than that. It's just like very, not because she's stupid by any means. She's got a heck of a lot on her mind. So
mhm,
it's like now we've done one little thing. It's like if each piece of knowledge was a brick, you lay one at a time, and before you know it, you've got a house. But don't be too big in a hurry to do that training. So that's one of the things is that's in a personal way,
yeah.
trying to prepare other people.
How much of what you're implementing now was passed on to you by either your sister or your dad versus systems that you've created yourself?
I don't know, but I've done a lot of it myself, and that is not to take away from what Dad put into place. Like, and he would say that he learned things from the past because he worked for a GC before.
Yeah.
He got into spec building because he didn't know any better. He worked for somebody who also did spec building. So it was kind of like you don't know what you don't know, as opposed to somebody who's a custom home builder who decides to become a spec builder. He was exposed to the whole 9 yards. So it was like part of his building DNA coming into this. But the budget that I use, is very similar to what he used like back in the 70s. But instead of it being by hand and I run a 10 keypad, I've got it in an Excel spreadsheet, and I've decided to break it down into smaller parts. But the bones, the framework is still the same thing. It's just how we get there. When it comes to the building code side of things, Dad only learned code when he failed inspections.
Yeah.
And even then he never learned the code. He just learned what he had to do to
Yeah.
pass inspection.
What do we need from me so that we can keep moving on?
Exactly. Yeah, let's solve this problem.
So
But when
you
it
would go ahead, sorry.
when it comes to like the design engineering, the did I
I can hear you. Oh, he froze. Is he
Okay,
frozen on your?
sorry
Oh,
about
there you
that.
go. You're
Everything
back.
was spinning from my end. Sorry. But when it comes to like the design engineering, the building physics, the building science, um, it's kind of like one of the physicists or what have you. He said, if I've seen further than other men, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. It was like Isaac Newton or one of those guys. Dad, what he accomplished still is amazing, and all that he did. So it's like if I'm doing things beyond what he did, he set so much of it up. And then you just take it from there. But I'm always learning and observing other people and what they're doing and try to change, like not think that I've got it all figured out. Hopefully what I'm doing 5 years from now is better than what I'm doing right now or even
Yeah.
tomorrow.
So I was listening to another podcast with you, and you were saying that you love your dad to death, but he's never been an amazing teacher. Um, so how like were all of these lessons and these systems just passed along by proxy, by you being beside him, looking at what he does, what he doesn't do? Or was it, hey, I'm going to try this on my own and then he'll correct me? Or how did you guys basically um, evolve and adapt what he was doing into what you're doing today?
I hate problems. And when I first started with the company, there were so many like callbacks, problems, issues with subcontractors that my natural personality is what caused the problem and what can we do to prevent this from ever happening again. Like when I was around 20, there was a custom home magazine, and what the article said was there's three kinds of builders. There's the kind of builder who runs around all day long putting out fires. And then the second builder runs around all day long putting out fires and he's really good at it. And then the third builder runs around putting out fires and figures out why did the fire start in the first place and let's not have it happen again.
Hmm.
So I think that is part of what this is. Some of it maybe because I've had the foresight to think ahead, but all too often I think that there's been a problem and it's me going analyzing it and figuring it out and how do we solve that problem and then how do we not have this happen again. So Dad, bless his heart, he would just send me into the building department with pretty much no instructions whatsoever, and then I would have to sink or swim. And then over time you just start getting better and better at those types of things. Or the amount of time I've spent in crawl spaces that were too wet because Dad would want to save money by keeping the foundation stem wall too short, and the excavation contractor would say, no, Tim, it should be higher, but Dad wants to save money. And then you've got the money at the back end and the wasted time because you've got water in the crawl space. Oh, I
Mhm.
know. Keep your elevation higher. Well, Dad never really like shot a laser on what your current elevation is versus where it is at the street and where things going to end up. That's just come with me with time making those
Mm.
applications and planning ahead further. Much of it was him reacting to the day, and over time I like to think we've gotten better at forecasting what the potential problems could be to try to prevent them.
Are you guys building all your houses like full foundations, footing, slab, or don't a lot of people out that way do like post and beam type stuff?
Well, post and beam is more of a framing structure, or unless you mean like a crawl space post and beam floor structure with a
Yeah.
perimeter
Yeah, like
foundation.
don't a lot of people do that out in the Pacific Northwest?
Ours are probably 90% crawl spaces. So your typical spread footing with a stem wall. We can either go with pier pads on the interior for the structure with posts
Yeah.
to beams and joists. Sometimes we do a slab on grade, but it's more like a walkout basement and it's dependent upon what the slope of the site is. So 3 of them that we're doing right now are all quote unquote slab on grade, but then one side of the foundation will act like it'll be a restrained retaining wall, and it'll be like 9 feet up. And then on the other side of it, there'll be maybe 2 feet or so of a stem wall. So because the lot is sloped, it
Mm.
carves into the hillside, holds back that soil. You'll drive in on the front side, and then down below, you'll be able to walk out at a separate elevation to the backyard.
This is completely off topic, but I'm like thinking about this now. When you're doing these pier footings and then framing your decking and everything off of that, what are you guys doing if you're not pouring a slab on grade underneath the home? Like as far as insulating, air sealing, all of that stuff.
Yeah, that is a digression, but here we go.
Sorry, I was just thinking about it. I don't know what made me think about that, or that they do it out that way. I just feel like I had seen it.
Yeah, no, I love it. So by code, you have to put a 6 mil vapor barrier in Washington State. I don't
Mhm.
believe it's a national code to prevent the water vapor from coming up. The biggest kicker for us is actually liquid water, aka rain or snow.
Mhm.
So if we maintain positive slope on the outside, it's like a rain and drain. When
Mhm.
it's cold, you typically don't have water vapor in the air. Cold air is dry air. So in the November through April-ish, when we have a lot of rain, it's also cold, which means we don't typically have water vapor. So we don't have to worry about that. We need gutters, we need downspouts, we need to get that water away from the house, and we've solved like 99% of our problems.
Mm.
The water vapor on the interior then just gets handled by the 6 mil plastic. If that's what we put down, you can do a stego. If you want to go to like a 10 mil, a 15 mil, you could do a rat slab, a couple inches of
Yeah.
concrete. It's expensive, and we're in a weird climate zone where even having vented crawl spaces tend to work. So we typically leave them vented, although I'm looking into a design as far as sealing them off. But in the Pacific Northwest, it's amazing that you can get away with it. Floor joists, cavity insulation. R30, I think, is code by code minimum
So that's
for
6 mil just is laid on top of the gravel, or the
exact
dirt,
on top of the dirt. Yep.
and then are you taping it around each footing?
I think it only has to be overlapped.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
then you're insulating the floor, not the walls at that point, correct?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be this like, you're basically it doesn't have to be continuous if there's small discrepancies. It's pretty minimal in as far as vapor transfusion, if that's
So
right.
that's where if you know like what your soils are, we
Mhm.
have well-graded soils is what the term would be. They're typically decently um, draining.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing the civil engineering side of the equation can change as opposed to Louisiana or
Yeah.
Georgia, right? It's going to be a different solution.
Yeah.
On the air sealing side, we use aero barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So our pressure boundary in that situation would be our subfloor. So we've got our insulation in contact with the quote unquote air barrier.
Got it.
There's one house that I worked on around me that's built that way. I mean, we have a lot of vented crawl spaces around here. Typically, it's just a rat slab, but one of my customers, it was a big house too, and they had it built like that and had the poly underneath. I guess they had crushed stone or something down before that. And then it was just standard insulation under there, vented crawl space. And I mean, the house was 40 years old, no issues. Um, it's just like I never see houses built like that around me, especially it gets cold here. Um, but it definitely when it's done right, it works.
That's one of the biggest things is climate zone 4C. One building scientist calls it the Goldilocks zone. It's like not too hot, not too cold. Now we do get the heat, we do get the cold, but the earth itself tends to stay at a decent temperature. It's not like up in Alaska where you've got permafrost going on.
Mm.
We're a pretty moderate area. And then the other factor is there's certain high radon zones in Washington state. And then there's some zones that are moderate. I can't remember what the terms are. We're not a high radon zone, but by having a vented crawl space, we don't have to do the radon mitigation that you would have to do. Not that that's a deal breaker, but it's just one more thing that you have to factor if you do a concealed or a sealed up crawl space here. And then you've got to add mechanical ventilation. So there are some factors which I'm looking into. So, if you have me on in 5 years, I might say, hey, here's how we're doing it today.
Mm.
But as of right
Yeah.
now, that's how we're doing it.
What so you had mentioned that you came on board and whenever there were issues, callbacks, repairs, that you made it a point to solve a lot of those issues. One of the questions that I had for you, being that you guys are a 45-year-old company building in the same general geographic location, multiple houses sometimes in the same development, you're not a huge company. I would assume that you don't have a full-time maintenance or warranty staff taking care of your houses. So what what have you implemented, or what are a lot of the key focal points for you to ensure that these houses that you're turning over and then building a house two down from them with the small business that you guys have, that you're not having to go back and make all of these repairs? Because I would assume that having a very lean business, that for you to have to pull labor off of a job that's being built to go service a house that's already built would probably cut into a lot of your efficiency, productivity, and profit.
We include a line item in our budget for callbacks. So it's almost like an insurance fund, so to speak. So if you've got that in there and then you do have that one off that's expensive, like we had one recently, if we would have hired an outside firm, I'll bet you it would have been a $15,000, $20,000 bill. Like it was not pretty. So sometimes you use your callback fund, sometimes you don't. But that is a rarity that we have something like that. And I think it was actually a municipality issue. I just chose to take care of it because I didn't want to fight City Hall and get into a he said, she said, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, let's just fix it. Pretty sure it would have resulted in some kind of litigation if I wouldn't have just taken the bull by the horns. But for the little onesie twosie type things, we don't have them anymore. Almost ever. Once in a while we do, but a big part of it, I've become kind of like the house whisperer. Like I can walk into a house and I'm like, hey, somebody left a fan on. Or I just see things. So by the time somebody buys the house, there's no punch list and there should be nothing we're not aware of unless it's something like, hey, when we're running the dishwasher and the food disposal, the circuit breaker trips. I probably would never know that but you know
Yeah.
what? Maybe I will start that in my
Mm.
little checklist. So it's having screwed up so many things to know what things to look for so that we don't have those issues.
Are you strict with that when you do run into an issue, like you're documenting it and basically going through the process to make sure it simply does not happen again?
What I have is I still use Evernote. I don't know if you know that program.
Yeah, I use Evernote.
Okay. So years ago, I started just keeping a list for a house process of everything that goes into it. Now, I don't get into every detail of every step of the process because there
Mm.
is some intuition that you just
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
But then when I start a new project, I'll take my process template and duplicate it. But that process template, if there's something that comes up that was either a mistake or a step in the process that it's like, oh, I almost forgot that, or maybe I did forget it, I'll put that in my process template. And then it's like a living document that's always getting improved so that I've got my checklist, so if it starts early, like building department approval, you know, septic design, whatever the case is, footing bar delivery,
Yeah.
those types of things. It,
I thought I had it somewhere. We in my Builder 20 groups, they had put together a document. Uh, I think I just froze myself trying to open the document because I literally think it's 200. I think it's 200 pages in Word of
Of just
document, and it's
punch out
every
stuff
single step.
or just to build a home?
No, no, like step step one. This is how you build a house. Um, yeah, chapter one.
It would
Like
take you the entire
I'm trying to see how
time
many.
to build a house to go through the document.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a checklist. It's literally a checklist, like every step. I'm trying to see how many pages. How do I
we
tell?
did have one call back, Tyler, that Timmy went on. um, Had a homeowner. They had a bee's nest up where there was like an overframe, two gables kind of came together.
Yeah.
So Timmy went over, talked to the neighbors. Um, I don't think he had to do this, but he did it anyway. He said he would put some steel wool up in there. I had copper wool from a home inspector from a house that we sold like 4 or 5 years ago. I'd done the research back then, and copper wool is better than steel wool. And we still had the roll from Amazon, and thankfully we were able to find it. He goes over today. They just love him. They give him pie, for crying out loud. But in the past, I was dad's buffer. When dad worked for the other GC, dad was that guy's buffer. So I talked to Timmy about
Mm,
this one, and it was a roof framing thing. And it was nice because Timmy just took care of it. And that can be a
Yeah.
little bit of a tough thing for me personally because I'm negotiating with them. Sometimes I have to say no. So there can be that it's nice to have a buffer sometimes. And then
It is, and I think it separates the emotion from it to a certain extent, right? Where you have somebody who did that work and they did their best, and even if it is a mistake or something on their part, to be able to remove and absolve him of that emotion and be like, "Hey, this is what I told him we do. It's on me. Nothing you did wrong." I think that it makes for a better relationship. I think a lot of people don't realize how emotionally tied you are to the project, that like a change or fixing something isn't it's not just like the reaction isn't necessarily ego driven. If it's a poor reaction, it's like, I tried my best and now you're telling me that my best isn't good enough, or like I knew that that didn't turn out the way that I wanted to, and I really tried to figure it out on the fly, and this is the best that I could do, and then it turns into almost, like I said, like an emotional reaction rather than just black and white. And to have somebody there who can really just make that more of a transactional experience, I think does help immensely.
yeah, yeah,
I struggle with that a lot, being that I'm on the job, whether it's a designer or a customer. who wants something changed. It's like I put so much thought into that, and this is what, and they just don't want to hear it. They just either don't like it or want it changed. And like it would be so much easier if somebody were just like, "Hey, spoke to them. They're fine with paying for it. They just want to change this to this because that's what they want." And I'd be like, "All right, fine. I'm getting paid for it." But
Yeah.
it's tough when you're that involved with it.
Yeah, and I don't contend with that side of it, but I definitely contend with just the jerks that aren't cooperative. I had a neighbor who was just an absolute jerk. And I'm like, we don't need to be this way. Like, let's just talk about it. I think I've demonstrated myself to be a pretty level headed person, and his poor wife is there trying to play middleman. The guy's over something very ridiculous, threatening, well, then I'll just take you to court, right? People just go straight to that. And it's like,
Yeah,
really?
there's no
Really?
middle
So
ground.
annoying.
What are your damages here? Do we really want to get into a discussion on the law? Because we can talk about this, or maybe we can just dial it down a notch and we can talk about what the
Right.
situation is and see if we can come up with something here. And thankfully he calmed down and we'll take care of it. But the other factor is I've got my brother-in-law who works for us, and he is my right-hand man. He is to me what I used to be to dad, as far as tons of process things, and he knows how we do things. And he is so good at dealing with subs, and he's good with customers. I mean, he's just a very good people person. I can just pretty much rely on him for anything when it comes to the process side of things. So he's a big part of the success.
Yeah, it's neat to hear what you guys are doing and the approach that you take, and obviously you're in somewhat of a unique situation being that the business has been established for so long, that you guys are financially backing most of your projects, that you're owning the land, you're owning the build. A lot of times if they're not selling, you're able to hold them and rent them or lease them until there's some sort of a turn in the market or spike in the market. And I don't think that a lot of people have that perspective of the industry, at least not who I've spoken with. So it's interesting to hear um, the frugality of the business, what your dad has instilled in you guys, and how through all of that you're continuing to build a good house. That there's certain things that are non-negotiables for you, and if you have to hold a house and rent it until it's ready to sell, like you'd rather do that than put a product to market that you can't stand behind. So that's really cool to see you guys doing that, and to hear what goes behind it in all of your processes and your systems.
Appreciate that, Tyler. I'm not
Are
emotional.
you
I
crying?
promise. No, I just apparently hadn't talked for a while. I promise I'm not crying over here.
No, I mean, one of the things I appreciate is the transparency too. I think that, and also like how dedicated you are to the process in which makes sense for you guys and your market. I was making a couple notes when you were talking, especially earlier, about like you know, the your data driven, and you have the Zillow set up with rent, a couple zip codes, and it gives you this insight into market, and over time builds like this almost subconscious awareness as to what's going on in that market. And truthfully, that, to you, that was probably something that seems like a very simple thing, but for me, I'm like, man, that's such a good tip, where it's like I can just turn that on. Now frankly, I probably won't always look at it, but at least it gives me the opportunity to start becoming more aware of, what is going on in some of the areas that I do want to build. And I think about that constantly. It's like, oftentimes we're running a comp or a pro forma on a neighborhood in the moment, where it's like, well, what if I were to have a pulse on these areas for a long time and just always kind of touching base with it. So I think that was a super interesting tip for me personally, and I think a lot of people will get that. But also just the mindset around, you know, approaching business the way that you guys do and having the, the non-negotiables in terms of the quality of work that you guys put out, and of course how that ties back to social media. um it's funny, I've actually never called him Timmy until this podcast, mainly because and he's probably going to beat you up for it. um but I remember talking to Timmy years ago, and when we were chatting, and I thought he was this outgoing person, and he's like, "No, man, like, I started dancing because no one was around. I would never do that around people." Um, but it's funny to think, like, that's what brought you guys here, and has, elevated your business into a point of being more profitable and probably being more nimble, but also really sticking true to what you guys are building in terms of a
Yeah.
quality product.
Yeah, the social media side has definitely made me a better builder. Like, uh,
Oh, yeah, for
unbelievably.
sure. I mean
Yeah.
you, I mean, I think a lot
Yeah.
of people feel that way.
You can just choose to follow somebody in something that you may not have even known you needed to learn about. And you just follow them for a period of
Yeah.
time and you're like, oh man. Or like, if I can't explain something simply, I learned this from somebody else. I need to go back and do research until I can. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll be doing all this research before I'll post something and I'll learn so much about it.
Mm.
I don't want to be an idiot. Um, and
It's funny, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I'm just gonna post it, and if it's wrong, someone's gonna tell me I'm wrong, and then I can do an apology video. I do it constantly. People are like, "That's not right." I'm like, "Alright."
I'll keep that in mind.
I
Let me
need an
let me
answer to something. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
post it and get my answer.
Yeah.
I don't
Just
think
post
this is
something
right. Let me
completely
post
wrong.
it. I'll figure it out quickly.
But I do that even
It's
like
like, "Did
asking
you"
people. I've got like the coolest followers on Instagram. I did one the other day because the guy hurt himself and we had blood on our concrete. So I was like, hey, how do you get blood off of concrete? I get this person who's like on call for a hazmat, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, thank you. Or somebody who knows how to, anyway, I won't
I
get
feel
too
like you
deep
could
into
get
that.
some sketchy people who are gonna tell you
Well,
how to
now we
get
need to know
blood
how do
off
you how
concrete.
Peroxide was
what
like number one, and definitely some moms were the ones who were responding to me about how to clean up blood.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
So is there anything on the horizon coming up that you're excited about? Anything going on with life, business, that you're excited about or that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to share? No pressure.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. I hadn't thought about it, but I'm partnering with Initech Windows out of British Columbia, Canada, and they
Cool.
this is how Mark Willie, I don't know if he's been on here before, but how he described Initech was like most people want a Ferrari, they're a Lamborghini. So our weakest link in our building envelope for years has been our windows. And I've
Mm,
known that, but I also know that I cannot just continue putting money into our houses and make them unsaleable.
Mhm.
Um, so partnering with those folks, especially because of Build Show, and then of course Timmy with Awesome Framers, and then possibly doing a series with Build about the decision making
cool.
that goes into building a house. So, at least for us, from our perspective, some of those things that I think we even touched on here, but I'll probably take a deeper dive into like the foundation system, the floor systems, mechanical systems, finishes. You know, if it passes, Mark's going to present it today, and if you never hear about this again, then you'll know it crashed and burned. But if you do hear about it, you heard it, or
That's
see,
cool though.
you heard it here first.
How far are you guys from British Columbia?
I don't know how many hours. So we're on the Kitsap Peninsula. You can drive up there. You can take ferries. 5-ish hours
Yeah, it's not bad.
Where are you guys again?
across the water from Seattle, Washington State.
Like,
Port Orchard
what city or
is the
what area
city.
is that?
Yeah.
Port Orchard. Oh,
So
Have you
like if
have you been up that I would assume you've been up that way.
not as much as I wish. I tend to head
Really?
south more to like Oregon.
Yeah. I was up there this winter. It's pretty cool. I'd like to get up there in the summer though.
I'm trying to figure out how to get up there because they've got like a new testing
Oh, okay.
chamber that they're setting up. The stuff they do on their windows for testing is lights out so far beyond what United States does. So they're supposed to be setting up a new testing chamber, for testing things like the structural strength, that's not the right word, of the frame. They do ingress and egress testing for windows for air, pascals of water pressure. So yeah,
That's
passive house
interesting.
certified.
I didn't realize there was so much
A
water
lot of
there.
coastline here.
It's the Pacific
I mean,
Ocean.
no, but it's inland quite a bit, and I don't know. I'm gonna sound like an idiot. I just never paid attention to the upper left corner of the United States and how the Pacific Ocean
Yeah,
ran
so
all the way
that's the
into
Puget
Seattle.
Sound, and there's lots of islands. Bainbridge is
Mm.
like
Ton-
extremely expensive, but they've got some really high dollar figures
yeah.
there. And then Seattle is really cool because they've got Lake Union, and then they've got Mercer
Mm.
Island, which is in Lake Washington. So you've got all that coastline to be able to build
You have a
on.
ton of
Yeah.
ferries. That's cool.
Yeah, my wife's cousins live in, is it Redmond? Is that
hmm
where
hmm
Microsoft is?
Yep, exactly.
They're coming in this fall to visit, but we went up there. My wife's uncle actually married us. So at the end of our honeymoon, we went from San Francisco up to Seattle. So we
Mm,
visited them there. It's a nice area.
I love it
Very,
here.
yeah, very cool. I enjoyed it. I'd like to get back. I'd like to get back to Whistler too, British Columbia. Super cool. I would find any excuse you can to get up there as much as possible.
Did you do Blackcomb and Whistler, or just one of them?
Both.
Do
Um,
you prefer one over the other?
they were both great. Blackcomb, no, I feel like I like both. Maybe Blackcomb seemed like it was possibly a little less crowded from like a family perspective and younger skiers. Um, but that like comparatively speaking, skiing out west and especially East Coast, it's so massive out there, and the way that the mountains are, they're like not necessarily as tall. They're just ever expanding. So it was just a very unique experience, but both mountains were great. Super clean. Everyone was friendly. I think I saw like 2 pieces of trash on the mountain the entire time. Um, but it was really cool. I'd like I said, I'd like to get out there in the summertime and see it because it was beautiful in the wintertime, and I can't imagine in the summertime.
I snowboarded Sunday River. Is that Maine years ago, and it was just ice,
Yeah,
like
that's pretty much all it is.
pure ice. One guy was, I don't know if he was pulling like a 360 over a tabletop or something and broke his wrist. Like it is unforgiving over there. That is for sure.
Yeah, I skied a bunch out west, like in the Rockies, Utah, and a fair amount on the East Coast growing up. But yeah, it's pretty much ice, just ice. Have some sharp edges, but it's not that much fun, especially if you're coming. Like I would never come out east to ski if you lived out west. It's definitely a downgrade. Cool, man. We appreciate you coming on. Appreciate the time. I know it's right smack dab in the middle of your day.
Thank you for your hospitality. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you gotta go. You gotta go eat your protein
Yeah, I
shake for
appreciate it, Brian.
lunch. I know.
He had
A
his
lot of
protein bar before
protein.
he got on.
You're gonna be ripped next time we see you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, well, tell everyone we say hi. Appreciate your time.